Thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. This is the last one in the Red October Kalashnikov 2017 Championships. We said at Stage 9 that we're going to do a conclusion of the match in general, but also talk about the gear we used.
And then last day of the match, we're like, we're tired. Let's think about this and do the video in a day later.
Yeah, we really wanted to dwell on it for a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think that the immediate response you have after anything, especially right after a stage, whether it went right or wrong, is necessarily the best answer. You have to kind of let things marinate for a little. So
exactly.
So it's been what, 2 days? We drove home.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep. So we're back. We know the results. We know how things went. We know which stages were thrown out and which ones were kept.
Yep.
Let's talk about the match first, and then we'll dig into the bits and pieces we learned about our gear. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
So I think this year, I don't know what you think. I think the stages were actually, in general, in aggregate, the whole match taken as a whole was even better than the first one.
Yes, I would agree. Not hugely better, but a nice incremental. Polished it up, cleaned it up.
Yeah.
Everything was a little better than last year.
10% better than what it was in 2016.
Exactly.
And that was the initial first attempt. The first year they had 100 and something shooters, I think.
Yep.
And this year there was a bunch of people that didn't show up, which is weird because if you paid money, I think you'd show up.
You would think so.
And there was a couple DQs, but they were included in the overall score. So in aggregate, I think this year there was 208.
Yes.
So just about 100 more shooters than the year before.
A substantial improvement.
And the stages were, like you said, not wildly better, but better.
Yeah.
Like there was polish put to this that wasn't a little more polished.
Yeah, exactly.
And it definitely was in the theme of the celebration of the AK again. I mean, we have a stage where it's a California build party and you're limited to 10 round mags.
That was one of the really fun stages.
Super tongue-in-cheek, funny, kind of awesome. You're actually trying to, rivet one of your folded, your stamp sheet metal folded to receivers. That was cool.
Been there and done that.
Yeah, you have. That's true. And so that was cool, and that kind of uniqueness. It's not something you see in a lot of major matches because the kind of people and the pro competitors that show up at major matches tend to eschew that kind of stuff because they see it as inconsistent.
Right.
And therefore the fun can't be had because it's not consistent. Right. Which is the reason Stage 8 got thrown out. And we landed up talking to Brian Nelson about what happened. So Stage 8 had a stage gun. It was a Rifle Dynamics rifle. Beautiful rifle. Great, Rifle Dynamics and Fuller makes incredible stuff. Mm-hmm. And there was an assertion that at one point that the mount that was on there holding the the aim point, had come slightly loose. And Brian checked it. And when he checked for zero, it had, according to him, it was maybe slightly loose. And in the process of that, he said it was still able to hit the target, but it wasn't tight. And that happens. This gun's it was the first day out, just built. Someone hadn't checked this properly. It wasn't Rifle Dynamics' fault. It's a great rifle. We know this, but he tightened it. And in the process of tightening it, whether it started a little loose or not, or was always a little loose, or became loose, or wasn't even loose enough to matter, the minute you tighten a bolt or change anything on that rifle because it's a prop gun that determines score, right, that stage became invalid. Yeah. And so people said, you can't keep that stage in. This has changed everything. And I don't know if it did or did not, but that stage got thrown out and turned into a bonus.
It was a bonus.
It became a bonus. So apparently whoever won that stage in their division is going to get some special thing.
Huh. Interesting.
But it did not become part of the aggregate 9-stage overall match score.
Well, this is kind of why stage guns are a sketchy idea in general. It's just really hard to have 200 people use a single gun without anything going wrong or weird. And if your gun goes wrong or breaks or loses zero or anything, that's entirely on you. But people look with a stage gun. People look at it as, well, the basic hardware of the stage was inconsistent, and I got screwed by it. And
the challenge of that is that whether or not there was ever looseness in that mount's irrelevant, because even if that hadn't happened, there are people, and it's just the way it is. It's human nature. I'm not saying gamers are not. This is human nature. If you were to shoot that stage with that gun and shoot it clean, you'd be like, awesome. If you were to shoot that gun and have a problem and maybe have a couple misses, you're going to be like, oh, that gun's broken. Yeah. That's just human nature. And so throwing a gun out there that's not yours and then requiring hits at 100+ yards on this steel that's on the clock, that's timed, it's cool, it's fun, but you have to approach that from one of a few ways. Either one, we don't care, that's what it is, eat it and live with it. Like we decided fair.
That's the way you have to do it.
We considered fair and decided against it. Or you don't do it. Because there's always going to be at least one person out of 200 that's going to make the statement, this doesn't have a zero.
Even the other two guns, stage guns in the match, which were much less demanding, required much less demanding use, they both had problems. There was a pistol in one of the stages that occasionally didn't lock open, or didn't. There's something that occasionally malfunctioned on it. and even just the bolt-action Mauser.
Yeah.
That thing was being shot with cast lead hand loads because they were using it at very short range. And my understanding is by the end of the match, it was having some fouling issues, and people were having trouble getting rounds into battery.
Right. So
something will always go wrong with a stage gun.
It's super cool and fun, but it's just something that when it comes to a major match, probably to avoid. And by the way, it's fun, and I love the creativity that was provided as a result. But the reality is, it's probably a bridge too far in a major event.
Yeah,
Something you can get.
Unfortunately.
At a local match, I'll throw something out there. In fact, we did it. 2-gun. We've thrown out guns out there where we're like, this gun's broken. There's a can of ammo. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, and there's no magazine. We've done that, and that's just what you get at 2-gun. But when you're doing it for prizes and such,
yeah,
that's tough. That's a tough thing. But the stages as a whole were fun. They were, I think I'd say they were even slight. Not that this match was extremely physical, but it was probably more physical than the first one.
Maybe a little bit. I wouldn't say there was a substantial difference.
Trench system was longer.
A little bit, yeah.
And there were a couple longer, more gully run kind of things.
Yes. Yeah.
Instead of one, there was a few.
Boy, the first 2 stages, I think, were some of the best.
They were. Yeah.
The open it wasn't really a gully run. It was kind of like an open terrain run. For stage 1 was awesome.
Yeah, it was.
And the trench system was great, except for the spinner.
You can never have enough trenches. It's like cowbell. Just keep putting it on.
And you can, there's no such thing as. Let me rephrase. Spinners always suck. It just always suck.
Yeah, I got a video coming out about spinners not being as bad as you think they are.
No,
you'll get there.
No, you're wrong. They're bad. They're horrible.
But the other thing we noticed is that the light and heavy division is defined as any AK with iron sights and a 30-round mag.
Yes, and that was fine last year.
Yep.
This year, people started bringing more enhanced rifles, more customized rifles. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, this thing is basically a gamer AK. It has most of the same improvements that the gamer ones did. Namely, the action is slicked up and smoother. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a Valmet, so it came from the factory that way.
Sure.
It has really good aperture sights, which is one of the major improvements you can make on an aftermarket gun. Mm-hmm. I've got an extended magazine release on it. I've got a nice trigger on it. There's a few extra things people can put in an AK, but most of them are here.
That's true, but that's not the one I'm actually talking about. So what I'm talking about is there were guns that were there that were either in light or heavy that are defined as acceptable because they are iron sights with a 30-round mag. Yeah. But they have flared mag wells. They have a charging handle on the left side. They have a bolt hold open. They've got aperture sights. They've got all sorts of whiz-bang doodads on that. That while it does conform to that statement of iron sights and 30-round magazine, it's not what I consider exactly a celebration of the AK.
Well, part of the goal of this match is to encourage people to use AKs and tinker with them. Mm-hmm. And so I think seeing guns improved aftermarket is one of the specific things that this match would like to promote. However, at the same time, it's also just a fun way to play with a totally bone stock AK. So I'm pretty sure next year they're going to divide up the divisions a little bit more, so that there is a classic division that is basically a stock Wasser 10 or equivalent thereof.
How that's going to be defined is to be clarified later, but we were conversing with Brian Nelson, the match director, about that, and we were saying, we were kind of recommending, both you and I came to the same conclusion. If you want to keep this pure like it was the first year, there's no reason to exclude these improvements because these kind of matches drive the industry and shooters to do interesting, unique, and improved things. Right. So making the AK a better platform as using this as a mechanism to do that is a good thing. Yeah. You don't want to push that out, but you want to still leave room for those classic guns that originally it celebrated to be included. Right. So a classic light and classic heavy along with light. So if you have classic light and heavy, and then light and heavy, and then open and armored, then now you've got pretty much room, and com block, pretty much room for everything. Yeah. And by the way, the stages were designed that a standard iron-sighted AKM was still sufficient.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The accuracy standard was a little higher this year. There were a lot of use of a half-size shoot target pasted right smack in the middle of a no-shoot.
Sometimes moving.
Mm-hmm. Which, when I first looked at that, I'm like, oh no, or is this just like going to be the no-shoot trap? In reality, because of the distances where those targets were set up, it was really just there to force you to slow down a little bit and make good hits instead of just blasting through an array of targets.
And we'll get to this more with the gear later, but there was actually stage 4, which was this incredibly low shooting position that was in a constrained space, in which I would argue the iron-sighted AK with low bore offset was actually better than this beast. This was worse in many ways. So the match did definitely align itself to be doable with a standard AK. I just would love to see a definition of classic so that we continue to embrace that mil-spec gun and don't stray from the original goals too. Yeah. So anyways, that's that. That's really the match. It was fantastic. It was a little better than last year. The same vibe, the same camaraderie, the same fun. It was run very efficiently and well. Really, there weren't any real problems. Everything.
A few things were behind schedule, but that's just a fact of life with an event like this.
Minor.
Yeah.
The other thing that exemplifies that this is a match that's just really oriented around having a real match, but having a good time was the amount of costumes.
Yeah. Last year it was just Karl and I, and this year there were... I saw probably a dozen people.
I don't know if it was just us. There was a few of us, but we were the minority.
Yeah.
This year there was quite a few cool costumes. There was Viet Tong. There was North Chinese. There was
there were a bunch of Russian gangsters.
Gobniks or whatever those are called, right? There was me in my Alpha kit. You had the Finnish uniform stuff going on. Gosh, there was more than that. There was a bunch of stuff. So that really adds an air of fun to the whole thing, and it becomes, we're here to shoot a match. We're here to shoot good scores, but enjoying the event and enjoying the friendship that can be built around it is something that is unfortunately lacking in some competitive environments.
Yeah.
And being that, I think part of the reason that happens is not only because, unfortunately, I think some people don't respect the AK as well as they should. So therefore, this is a joke match. I don't care, which is not real because this is a real match.
It's not real, but it's those people. That's perfectly fine for them to take that attitude.
But I think that's part of the reason. The other reason is it is right around Halloween. Last year it was, and this year as well, right at the end of October, and therefore it has this why not come in a costume vibe.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing. It was super. Oh, we had a Saudi prince.
Yeah.
That was Sam Travis, who's an incredible shooter. He was there as that. So I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that 2018 is going to be even better than 2017, and 2017 was better than 2016. I think they're going to tweak and refine it, and I bet 2018 is just going to be one step further down this is really freaking awesome and a must-do event.
Yeah, I hope so.
In fact,
I know we'll be there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. I'm ready to go. In fact, one of our buddies shot with a PPS 43 semi-auto, 763 or 762 Tokarev.
An SBR one.
Yep.
So he had the short barrel, but he did have a stock. And he did really well.
He did very well.
Yeah.
I mean, he really placed above middle of the pack in the match.
Yeah.
And that goes to show you that this was a well-designed event and that something like that could really achieve success.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool, and he did really awesome. So that's fun and neat. And the comm block, I think we're going to see more interesting stuff going on there, too.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Comm block's kind of been dominated by the VZ58.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
That's another point, I think, and honestly. Comm block is also sort of open for comm block. So comm block is kind of like, anything goes as long as it's one of those other things. Yeah. And I would recommend this, and I don't know, Brian, if you're watching, if you do classic heavy and classic light, at this point, I would take a standard stock VZ58, even though it's not really an AK, and shove it into classic heavy.
Perhaps.
Because that is dominating comm block, and it's going to continue to do that. And I think comm block is a place where it'd be interesting to see something other than the one dominant VZ58 constantly just trounce. I mean, no, it's just the truth. But now, if you took a VZ58 and did some weird stuff to it and turned it into an open gun, that's a whole other story. That's that. So let's talk about our gear.
Yeah. So, Valmet M76. Fantastic rifle. I would say, I think I'm confident in saying this is the highest quality factory-produced AK out there.
It is a fantastic, beautiful AK. I didn't shoot it in the match, but we went out, the day before we went out there and made sure it was zeroed.
Yep.
It was darn close to perfectly zeroed right out of the box.
Yep.
And I can tell you, handling this, it really handles like glass. The bolt feels like everything is smooth. Nothing hangs up on anything. Gun balances well. The sights are superb.
Yep.
It feels great.
A couple things about them. The Finn military never used 5.56. All their guns were 7.62 by 39. However, the most common Valmet to find on the U.S. market is the 5.56 version. It uses special proprietary magazines that are stupidly expensive. I have one of them. A couple $100 a piece.
So Valmet made those only for this civilian-produced production thing.
Okay. Yeah, they had their own receivers, and so they made their own magazines to go with them.
All right.
However, the other option is Bulgarian 5.56 AK mags, which can be converted by a little bit of grinding on the rear magazine tab. A guy named Tony Rumor, a company called Tromix, did a lot of these conversions a while back. I have a bunch of these mags, and these all work. They all work perfectly for me. So
that doesn't surprise me. Let me say one thing about that, because I've seen some discussion in our Discord on the Patreon. Now, this one's been modified, but I do have a 5.56 Craig, a 74U, and it uses Bulgarian Circle 10 unmodified. Some of the 5.56 AKs have gotten some inappropriate disdain because it's not the original cartridge and they're not reliable. Well, let me tell you, if you get an Arsenal Bulgarian or obviously a Valmet and you use these Circle 10 mags, they work as well as any other AK.
Yeah.
So 5.56 AKs are not to be avoided. They're absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
I had literally no malfunctions of any kind through the entirety of the match.
And I have never had a malfunction with my crank either. Yeah. In 5.56.
So beyond that, Finnish costume hat was a hat. I did wear a helmet in a couple of stages.
Not all of them, but it did look cool when you did.
Yeah. Have to always point out, I'm not a Nazi. The Finns exactly copied the German Stahlhelm pattern. So, in fact, this was actually made in Germany by a German company that had previously made Stahlhelms for the German army.
The tooling was still there.
And the Finns bought helmets from them after the war.
There's really no reason not to. We talked about this briefly in the match videos. During World War II and post-World War II, I would argue this was the best helmet.
Yeah, it was. And it actually is one of the least obnoxious helmets that I have worn when we're talking about steel helmets.
It is. I would say it's funny because I would think that the American USGI helmet with liner actually is more comfortable than the Stahlhelm.
Yeah.
But the Stahlhelm provides you more protection.
And this is more comfortable to actually, more conducive to shooting with. I did not have any problems with this thing riding up on the back of my neck when I was shooting prone. It didn't fall into my field of view. It actually just worked. For a steel helmet, this was like the least bad of all the terrible options.
It is interesting. If you do the history of helmets, which is an interesting discourse and lesson in its own, the Stahlhelm really did live on post-war in many places for good reason. So you had no issues with it, really.
And then the Fem Camo was pretty cool. In fact, the best thing about the Finnish Camo, which I don't have here because it's being washed, is that it's meant to go over your regular uniform, which worked great at the match because at the end of the day, all I had to do was pull off the camo and I'm wearing regular clothing and I don't have to deal with changing.
I really like that method. Like, for example, we've got the now infamous InRange smock from World War II.
Yeah, same thing.
Well, it's cool because you have your normal stuff on, even if it's just civilian clothes, but shoot a match. And the two-gun matches are typically very filthy and dirty. You throw the smock on, go through the filth, take the smock off, and you're good to go. You're happy. Everything's clean. That's a really kind of neat thing, as long as it's not too hot. That whole coverall thing, overalls, really does work.
Yeah.
Other things about the Valmet I don't think you really talked about. The trigger is really interesting. It's got a long first stage take-up.
Yeah.
But it's got a good break, and it's got an excellent reset.
Yes.
And this sling swivel point is actually interesting, at least as a right-hander. For me, it feels like a place as a thumb rest.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
I don't think it was meant to be, but it certainly works well for that.
Which brings up an interesting point. There is no offhand requirement, no support side requirement at Red October. 2 years in a row now. They've never required shooting support side. There are a couple of shots that you might choose to shoot support side, but has never been a requirement.
It didn't occur to me. I wonder why they haven't done that. I bet now that we say it, I bet you we're going to see some of that in 2018.
But
so that's cool. You had no problems, as you would expect. The Valmet's a fantastic rifle. It did the job phenomenally. Your converted mags work great, and your helmet caused you no issues.
Perkele.
You did say that about 87 times, I think, in the match.
I figured it was going to be required.
Although you did throw a Munanuki in there once, which I really liked. Yeah, that was great.
You get me a Romanian Munanuki.
Yep.
Pick up my Valmet.
All right, so this beast of stuff. All right, so people are going to ask, and for good reason. I'm not going to do that in this video because this is more about the match, but we're going to talk about our experience of using the gear in the match.
Yeah.
I will do a video discussing every subcomponent of this rifle, kind of like we're doing with the What Was Started rifle. I'm going to talk about what the stock is, what this is, and that, but I want to talk about the general config. So I configured this not as a competition rifle, because if you shoot competition, you realize this is not a competition rifle. You look at it, you know it's not. This is a fighting rifle as seen in some of the Russian specialist forces. Yeah. Now, I've been using the term alpha because it's one of the better ones and it's catchy, kind of like what would Stoner do. But it doesn't necessarily reflect alpha directly. It just reflects specialist modernized AKs in Russian service. And so I referenced many, many photos, a lot. I have an archive that's quite large, looking through every bit of their gear, zooming in, what's that, what's this, what's that. Some of it in the field, some of it's propaganda. But you still get an idea of the gear. And I modeled this directly after that. I won the base rifle in this actually in the 2016 Red October match. I won the light division. This happened to be my prize. It's an SLR 104 FR, which is the one with the rail. And I decided, okay, I've got 2 of these now because I won the match with one the same rifle. So why don't I turn this into this alpha build? And it's been an interesting process. A lot of these subcomponents you can find on some websites that are scary and you don't know if you should put your credit card into them. Some of them are through eBay and other contacts. Some of it's just direct contacts. You send money via PayPal to mysteriouscymail.ru and you wonder if the stuff's ever going to come. And surprisingly, I've never been ripped off.
Yeah.
The stuff's always come. I get this box. It's got Mokba on it in Cyrillic. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Stuff always makes it, which isn't always the case when I order stuff from some Nowheresville, America. So that's kind of cool. One of the things that I did decide to do is that if you look at the specialist stuff in Russia, or the Russians are using, you don't see the Zenitco stock as much. You actually see a lot of CAA stuff, Command Arms or whatever that group. They have this is usually some kind of tube with an AR-15 stock. But since we were going the high end, I decided to go ahead and use Zenitco as much as possible. You do see Zenitco, you just don't see it as much. What I will tell you is that once you've dragged your AK-74 through the Zenitco catalog, you add an incredible amount of weight and bulk and girth to this gun.
Yeah.
Stuff that a person needs as a combatant in Syria isn't stuff you need on stage 4 of Red October. And
not so much.
Example, this laser unit. We'll have a full video series about these lasers because they really are an impressive piece of equipment. The laser unit on the right, I'm not going to use this at the match. I know that. Okay?
Well,
maybe. We'll get to that.
Maybe you should have.
Maybe. We'll get to that. The light, there was a chance if there was some sort of dark tunnel system, we'd have a light.
There was also a chance for a night stage.
Odds are, yeah, originally said. So the light made sense, and I've got a pressure switch here for that. Okay, cool. This is a pressure switch right here for the laser, so you've got light and laser. Having a pressure switch here makes sense because I can't get to the button on the laser unit itself. But this all adds, if you look at it, there's now an incredible amount of actual girth and bulk on the front of this rifle. Never mind weight, it's now wider. Okay. There's also something here called a gooseneck. Once you add all of this junk to your Zenitco Alpha gun, there's nowhere to put your darn light. And you don't want to mount it directly to the barrel for obvious reasons, so they make this gooseneck unit, and your light goes out in front. That does a couple things for you. It gets the light away from here and gets it off of here. It also allows you to use a pressure switch to activate it. It also means that it's under the barrel, and when you activate it, you're not throwing a shadow that actually distracts you. So you get a good light image from that. Other stuff that's worth discussing is I have a Zenitco rail on here, which is fairly low for an optics mount, but still a little off. It's a little high, higher than it could be. It could be lower. It should be. And an EOTech, which is also offset from that. This means that the sight to bore offset is actually extreme. We're talking, it's not a foot, but it's pretty much 4 inches. And AR's just around 2.5. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add another 1.5 inches of bore offset, that is a challenge if it's not something you use regularly.
Yeah.
You have to, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me get that. I'm getting ahead of myself. The charging handle, which is just a bolt-on piece, as you see here, this is truly an improved part. It really does allow you to get purchase on this quicker.
I have to say, I maintain my initial perception of that, which is that's a super redneck part.
What?
That happens to work just fine.
It does.
It's just a big knob with a set screw.
It is. It's a big knob with a set screw. The Russians are doing this. It does allow you to get a better purchase on it from either side. However, it once again increases girth and width of things on the gun. We'll get to that more. This is a Krebs safety. The Russians also have their equivalent of it. You'll see the specialist actually using a part that is either the Krebs part or an identical reproduction of it thereof. There's pictures of these in the field. They have a little bit different one. It's got a big old bolt-on part. I didn't care for it because it's just too big, so I ditched that and I just used the Krebs. This is actually a CAA Command Arms grip, which is, I went with that because the Zenitco one was metal, and I didn't want anything metal to grip onto in the desert. No good. And then one of the advantages of the PT1 stock is that you have an adjustable comb, adjustable length of pull, adjustable stock rear, and you can actually still collapse it with an optic mounted. Well, all that gee-whiz, whiz-bang stuff comes at a price, and all these accessories, most of which I did not need for a match, makes this gun 12-something pounds. Okay, that doesn't sound like, vertical grip too, just cut so that you have a place to get to your magazine. That doesn't sound like a big deal, except when you're swinging between targets, you're actually losing inertia. You have to stop, hit, move. You have to stop. You have to actively stop, hit. If you're swinging through stuff, the gun wants to keep moving. There's also an increased wear and tear on you as a human being running through match with it. You're carrying this thing. You can only keep it up for so long, and just carrying it is It's an endeavor.
This is all involved in why we did what we did with the Stoner rifles.
It is. This is the exact opposite approach. So the Russians do not have a market to... There's not a lot of places to lighten the AK, but still keep all of the field-required combative force multiplication stuff you might need. Lasers in the field have a purpose. You need to paint targets, you need to aim for targets, you need night vision. Lights have a purpose. The EOTech has a purpose. The Zenico rail is made heavier than it needs to be, and I'm not sure why that's the case. The ability to fold the stock is more important than the ability to change the length of pull, although neither is required. But all that stuff comes at that price. And so while they need this stuff in the field, you don't need it in a match, and this is where the difference comes between a competition rifle and a fighting rifle. But the reason I did this was, we always say this on InRange, it's like, how do you learn how this stuff works unless you try it?
Take it out and let it kick the shit out of you in a match.
Came at a price. My performance was hindered as a result. There was, not in many ways, there was a couple specific points in the match in which this rifle was a problem. The bore height offset was a problem, in that I occasionally shot either a little, I gave myself too much... I aimed too high to avoid doing a no-shoot, and as a process, hit the no-shoot, because I'm used to my AR 2.5-inch offset, and that happened a couple times. But the one that really got me was the stage 4, where you had to go underneath and get under this barricade and roll over prone and try to get something. This PT1 stock made it hard to get to the sight. It also meant that this stuff here could not give me an angle to get under the barricade high enough, so the targets weren't just under the barricade, they were actually kind of high.
Right.
And so you had to get the gun angled at this 30-degree angle to be able to get a sight picture and be able to hit the target. And I could get to the bottom of these 2 paper targets that were posted, but there was this one clay pigeon in a no-shoot. And I kept fighting with it, trying to get high enough, and then I went, turned the gun over and did this, and I was doing that.
You finally did manage to get to the right elevation, but with the bore offset, you were shooting off to the side.
I landed up shooting off to the right, got a bunch of no-shoots, and that stage just caught on fire. Dixie Wasteworks was not there to save me, and I was screwed. Now, if I had thought about it, and I don't know if this would have worked because we were in rather bright conditions, I might have tried to use the laser.
Yeah, I think this brings up a really interesting point, that if you have a laser on a competition rifle, it's there for the purpose of, well, I want to keep this a practical rifle, and at night that matters. However, the number of people who actually shoot at night approximates 0. Mm-hmm. And so what you end up with is this laser on the rifle that you just never, ever, ever use. And when you actually run into a situation like that particular stage, where that might have been the thing that would have worked best.
It would have.
Because you wouldn't have been trying to get behind the rifle.
If I could have seen it, which, by the way, this is a very powerful unit.
Yeah.
I didn't. Under the clock, it did not occur to me, because we don't use lasers enough for it to occur in my mind.
Right.
If I had flipped that thing on, maybe I could have used the dot and got the hit.
Yeah.
The other thing that occurred to me that I could have tried, which sounds really unorthodox, would have been to close the stock.
Oh, that's an interesting
Because closing the stock, guess what?
Yeah.
That's now not in the way for changing the angle of attack on the elevation of the rifle. But that occurred to me, of course, post-stage.
Afterwards.
Yes. So either the laser or that would have been a solution.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that 12 pounds of AK goodness that are usable in Syria because you need it to be that way in Syria is not 12 pounds of AK goodness at a competition.
You would have done better with my rifle.
Oh, absolutely. I did better the first year. Remember, I went as 1980s Spetsnaz guy, and I wore essentially pajamas and had a lightweight AK with iron sights and a tourniquet.
And it worked great.
It worked fantastic because you were still moving. So this, and you can't, after 2 days of lugging this thing, it becomes a beast. I do not know. Those Russian guys over deployed wherever they're deployed. I get why they have this stuff on there, but it's got to suck.
It's not just them. That's pretty much a stand-in for the M27. Same weight.
We talked about this
Same
later.
capabilities, really.
That stage 4, which was bad with this, would have been even worse with the M27 IAR.
Yeah.
The girth and bulk and weight of the front end of the M27 IAR, being piston and being with that quad rail on there and having the laser unit, all the stuff that's on that IAR would have been a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
Now, what that tells me is when the military, whether it's the Russian specialist or now the Marines going with the IAR, shooting rollover prone under a little low barricade isn't high on their list of military requirements. No. That's probably because it's not that often a real-world requirement. Yeah. It exists, but it's an unusual one.
Yeah.
I was joking. I'm like, if I had seen that and I come up as the Russian guy, I'd see that low port, and I'm like, comrades, gas, and then just walk away, because I ain't doing it with this, right? Or just shoot through the wall. But that's not how matches work.
Right.
So this is where you do learn your marksmanship skills, and you do learn certain things about gear. And this, while it's a fighting rifle, it's not a competition rifle. And it did It wasn't optimal. The other thing that was interesting is I shot an armored. So, a couple lessons to be learned from that. Oh, the other thing. This was actually a good one. Mags. This is a common Russian thing. I don't know if they do it as much as anymore than they did in the past, but you take 2 mags, put a spacer between them, and tape them together. This gets you 60 rounds on deck. As opposed to pulling from your thing or losing a mag, you flip from one mag to the other. Tons and tons of the stages of this match started chamber empty, what they call cruiser ready. When you put this 2 magazine thing into your AK, if you put it the way you'd want it, you put the left mag in first and the right mag's on the right, which is where the charging handle is. Because this is an administrative thing, you just pull the charging handle back and you can do it delicately and get around in the chamber. Doing it on the clock is much harder because this magazine's right below where you need to run the charging handle, which then forces you to put the right side mag in, which means you have to flip from the right to the left mag. And if you forget while moving on the clock to do it before you run empty, you still have the same charging handle problem. A number of guys in Armored and Open were running 45 round mags.
It would have been a better solution, I think.
It was the far better answer. Many of the stages required 28 rounds, 27 rounds, or something right around 30. That extra little buffer of the extra 15 rounds would have meant I didn't need to flip from one mag to the other. And if you watch the stages, there is a number of seconds lost by me going from one of these mags to the other, even though they're connected to one another.
Or a quad stack.
A quad stack would be great. I looked into that. Yeah, a little pricey.
Quad stack mags are always kind of a little sketchy.
Not just that, though. The Russian ones, there are Russian ones that are out there. There's 50 round ones. They started with 60 and went to 50 because the 60s weren't reliable. And there's pictures of them using the 50s. I found one. I could have bought. And it was $2,500. I decided I would tape 2 mags together. I do have a 45 and didn't bring it. Oops. That would have been a lot better.
You'll know better next year.
This isn't a bad thing, but when you're on the clock, it's not optimal. The other thing. Active hearing protection. Well, I wore these through the match, not because I needed them, because I had squishies on, but this is, believe it or not, the Russians use a lot of Western gear, and this is reflected in the photos. When you got these on, guess what? You've now added girth to your head. When you're crawling or doing rollover prone, this
stuff adds up.
Gets in the way. What gets in the way more than that, though, is this darn thing. Right, this is just an OpScore bump helmet. Russians use OpScore, too. Strange. We had this mostly because I could do first-person video with this really excellent Mohawk helmet camera. But this is another thing when it's on your head. This is higher than you're used to, and if you're not used to using this all the time, you will bump and catch it on things because your perception of your height is different than what the reality was when you're used to moving around. Plus, when you go roll over prone or whatever, guess what? Problem.
The object lesson here is helmets suck.
The big object lesson here is that if you're going to use gear like this in a regular way, unlike what we do on InRange, which is we change the gear all the time because we have to, because we're always profiling different stuff, use it all the time because you'll learn your body mechanics while wearing the helmet. You'll learn the body mechanics of your particular armor.
You'll truly appreciate how much it sucks.
The last thing I want to talk about, while there is no such thing as gamer armor yet, there is armor that is more applicable to speed than others, and this is not it. Okay, so this is legit Russian armor. There's Cyrillic there. There's Kevlar here. There's a Kevlar bib. There's Kevlar under their plates. The plates are heavy. These plates, I don't remember the exact weight. They're like 10 plus pounds. So you've got 2 of those, one in front, one in back. But what's different between the military's intended goals of armor and just standard, say, patrol armor or lightweight armor is the amount of coverage. When you have this on, you have Kevlar pretty much from here down to your belt line. And the plates themselves are rather large compared to American standards. This plate goes from the top of my sternum all the way to my belt line, rear and front. That's part of the reason it's as heavy as it is. That's great for protection. If you're in the field and you're trying to avoid blast damage or shrapnel or an IED, or for that matter, incoming rounds, the more protected, the more the better. In theory, until you need to move. Well, these matches are timed events that are based on speed and movement. And this armor is, while very protective from its military intended purposes, and I will say, the load-bearing vest itself is actually very well done. I think this Russian load-bearing vest is excellent. If you were to take the Kevlar out and the plates out, this load-bearing vest is pretty sweet. Or if you were to modernize it with some sort of composite armor to reduce some of the weight, that would make a big difference. But wearing it in its Russian intended goals, guys, this thing's a beast, man. This whole thing it weighs 10, 20, 30, 40-ish pounds, 30-something pounds of mass on your body while you're trying to move or crawl out of a trench. And you see me crawling in a trench, and I'm like, chunk, and then jump down, and you hit your ground on your knees, and you just go, kloosh. It's like shocks. There's one part where I'm running through the trench, and I jump into a hole, and I literally hit the wall and bounce off because of all the mass moving. if you're going to use this stuff, use it all the time because you get used to the mechanics. But there is a difference between full-scale military combat war zone body armor and patrol armor. And I think if you're going to be in the armor division, you probably want to consider, unless you want the learning experience, probably not.
It builds character.
It does build character. And you've seen that. I mean, even the Americans went through this. You saw Americans earlier on in the war. They would look like the Michelin Man
suits. Yeah.
Way worse than this. We're talking shoulder pads, groin pads, and they're like Terminal Lance did a lot of jokes about that because like I can't even move.
Yeah.
This isn't you can't even move, but the Russians found a middle ground between gosh, I can't move and I'm moving slow. This is you can move, but you're slow.
Right.
So that's my lessons on that. If you're going to use it all the time. I told you what I'm going to do with. You know what I'm going to do with this?
I know what I would do with it.
What are you going to do?
You're going to do something way dumber than what I'd do.
I'm going to do two things with it.
I would take it and I'd go, that's pretty cool, and I'd put it on a shelf.
I'm doing two things with it. One, we did get some photos, and I should be working on an article for something called the Book of the AK with David Fortier. We're going to do a review of Russian gear. But I'm going to strip these mags off, and occasionally I'm going to wear that thing at my gym. Because if you can get better wearing that, when you take it off, it's just like it's like working out in the Colorados. I mean, your lack of oxygen, take off 40 pounds of garbage, you're gonna be better. So it's gonna be a weight vest for the gym.
That sounds super fun.
Super stupid, but why not? Anyways, I think that's as much as we can go through on the gear. 545, 546 made no difference. Yeah, that's it.
Overall placement, I was 70 out of 208.
I was 57th. And out of 208, and in armored, I was 6th. I was 14th out of 31.
Okay.
And where were you in light?
I want to say it was 10 out of 24.
Sounds about right.
Somewhere near the middle.
Yep. So in the overall aggregate, 57 out of 208, I made it into the top 27%, and you were pretty close. In the armored,
I'm quite happy with my performance.
In the armored, I just made it above the halfway point.
Yeah.
If it had not been for the stage 8. I actually was 6th in armored.
Okay.
So that would have made a huge difference. But it is what it is. Stage 8 went poof. So guys, hopefully you appreciate this and you like this kind of deep dive into not just the match. I use the word deep dive again. Oh well. You appreciate this kind of delving into this content and overall a synopsis of the match, but also the gear. I think the gear is always a popular thing to talk about. Stay tuned for a deeper discussion on this gun and all the subcomponents of it, and probably some more about the armor. You're probably going to do more about your Valmet at some point.
It'll show up again, I'm sure.
And remind you, this is a wholly Patreon-supported project. We take no monetization from any ad revenue at all. So if you like this stuff, please consider supporting us on Patreon, and stay tuned to InRange.tv for the multiple distribution points you can find all of our stuff. Thanks for watching.